Daniel Marsh walked into the auction house on 7 looking for ship parts. His cargo hauler needed new fuel injectors, and he had salvage money to spend. The border station was dirty and crowded with aliens of every kind. Daniel did not like this place, but it was the only market for 3 systems. He followed the signs toward the machinery section, but took a wrong turn somewhere. The hallway opened into a large room filled with seats and a raised platform at the front. Aliens sat in rows facing the platform. Some wore expensive clothes and others looked like traders. An auctioneer stood on the platform speaking into a translator device. Daniel realized his mistake immediately. This was not the machinery section. This was the living contracts section. He had heard about these auctions but never seen one. Refugees and orphans were sold here as indentured workers. It was legal in this part of space, but humans found it disgusting. He turned to leave, but then he saw them. 2 small aliens stood on the platform. They had pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Thin antennae rose from their foreheads and trembled with fear. The older one looked about 8 years old in human terms. The younger one was maybe 5. They were sisters, and anyone could see it. The older sister held the younger one close. Her thin arms wrapped around the small body like she was trying to protect her from the whole universe. The little one buried her face in her sister's chest and would not look at the crowd. The auctioneer spoke in a bored voice. He said these were refugees. Their parents died in a ship accident 6 months ago. They had been in a refugee camp until the camp sold their contracts to pay for operating costs. The older sister was called. The younger was called. Daniel felt sick to his stomach. Spoke up in broken common language. She asked if they could stay together. Her voice was small but steady. She said she would work hard. She said she would do anything. Just please let them stay together. The auctioneer waved his hand dismissively. He said buyers would decide that. The contracts were being sold separately unless someone wanted both. A voice came from the front row. It belonged to a large alien with gray scaled skin and 4 arms. He wore expensive rings on each finger and his clothes were made of fine material. Daniel recognized the species as they were known for their mining operations and their harsh treatment of workers. They said his name was, and he wanted to bid on the older one only. He said she was old enough to work in his processing facilities. The young one was useless to him, too small, too weak. He would not waste money on something that could not earn its keep. His antennae went rigid with terror. She pulled closer and shook her head. She begged in her own language and then in common, "Please no, please do not separate us. She is all I have, I am all she has." Started crying. The sound was soft and broken. She did not understand everything happening, but she understood enough. She understood that someone wanted to take her sister away. The crowd watched with empty faces. Some looked bored. Others checked their communication devices. Nobody seemed to care about 2 small aliens crying on a platform. Daniel stood frozen at the back of the room. His hands were shaking. He told himself this was not his business. He told himself he could not save everyone. He told himself he had his own problems and his own debts and his own life to worry about. But he could not stop looking at them. Reminded him of his younger sister back on Earth. Her name was, and she was grown now with children of her own. But Daniel remembered when she was small. He remembered holding her hand when their parents fought. He remembered promising her that everything would be okay. He remembered what it meant to protect someone smaller than yourself. The auctioneer started the bidding on a loan, raised one of his 4 hands and offered a starting price. It was a low amount. Insulting, really. He knew nobody else would bid against him for a refugee child. Daniel checked his account on his wrist device. He had the salvage money. It was supposed to fix his ship. Without those repairs, his engine would fail within a month. He would be stranded. He would lose everything. He looked at Holding on the platform. The auctioneer asked for other bids. Nobody responded. He began the countdown, going once, going twice. Daniel's hand stayed at his side. His whole body was shaking now. He could feel sweat on his forehead. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was stupid. This was crazy. He could not afford this. He had responsibilities. He had a ship to maintain and contracts to fulfill and a life that depended on making smart decisions. Lifted her head from her sister's chest. Her large, dark eyes scanned the room full of aliens who did not care about her. Then somehow those eyes found Daniel at the back of the room. She looked at him, just looked, not begging, not pleading, just looking at him like she was memorizing his face. Like she wanted to remember that at least one person in the room had kind eyes. Something inside Daniel broke. The auctioneer raised his hand to finalize the sale, smiled with satisfaction, closed her eyes and held her sister one last time. Daniel opened his mouth but no sound came out. His throat was tight. His hand trembled at his side. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to stay quiet, to walk away, to save himself. He thought about promises made to someone smaller. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be when he looked in the mirror. The auctioneer brought his hand down. Daniel's arm shot up into the air. The whole room turned to look at him. A human at a living contracts auction. It was unusual. It was unexpected. Smile disappeared and his 4 eyes narrowed with annoyance. Daniel heard his own voice like it belonged to someone else. He said he wanted to bid on both of them, together. He would not separate them. The auctioneer looked surprised but recovered quickly. He asked Daniel to state his offer. Daniel looked at his account balance one more time. Then he looked at and on the platform, was staring at him with confusion and desperate hope, was still crying but quieter now. He named a price that matched what it offered for a loan. Laughed. The sound was cold and cruel. He looked at Daniel like he was looking at an insect. Then he raised his hand and doubled his bid. The auctioneer turned to Daniel and waited. Daniel swallowed hard. This was going to cost him everything. He knew that now. There was no going back. He had made his choice when he raised his hand. Now he had to see it through. The auction room was silent. Every alien in the crowd watched Daniel standing at the back with his hand raised. They waited to see what the human would do next. Sat in the front row with all 4 arms crossed over his chest. His gray, scaled face showed amusement and irritation mixed together. He had doubled his bid and clearly expected Daniel to back down. Daniel looked at his account balance again. The number was smaller than he needed. The salvage money was supposed to fix his ship. It was supposed to keep him flying for another year. It was supposed to be his safety net in a dangerous universe. He raised his bid anyway. The crowd murmured with surprise. Humans did not usually participate in these auctions. Humans found the whole practice uncomfortable. Yet here was one bidding against a wealthy merchant for 2 refugee children. Turned in his seat to look at Daniel properly. His 4 eyes studied the human with cold interest. He asked Daniel if he understood what he was doing. He asked if Daniel knew who he was bidding against. The family owned mining operations across 6 systems. They had more money than this human could imagine. Daniel said he understood. His voice was steady even though his hands were not. Smiled and raised his bid again. The new number was almost everything Daniel had in his account. That was testing him, trying to see how far the human would go. Stood on the platform holding. Her dark eyes moved between Daniel and she did not understand why this human was fighting for them. Nobody had ever fought for them before. The refugee camp sold them without a second thought. The auctioneer treated them like cargo. But this human with the tired face and worn clothes was spending his money to keep them together. Daniel matched the bid. Now he had almost nothing left, just enough for food and basic supplies, not enough for fuel, not enough for repairs, not enough for anything that mattered. Stood up from his seat. He was tall and broad with muscles built from a lifetime of harsh environments. He walked toward Daniel slowly. The crowd parted to let him through. Nobody wanted to be between a merchant and whatever he was about to do. Stopped in front of Daniel and looked down at him. He asked why. Why was this human throwing away his money on two worthless aliens? They were refugees, orphans. They had nothing to offer. The older one might work for a few years before breaking down. The younger one was completely useless. Daniel met his eyes without flinching. He said they were children. That was enough reason. Laughed again. He said humans were strange creatures, sentimental and foolish, always making decisions with their hearts instead of their heads. It was why humans would never truly succeed in galactic commerce. They wasted resources on things that did not matter. Daniel said nothing, he just waited. Raised his bid once more. The number was now higher than everything Daniel owned, higher than his account balance, higher than he could possibly pay. The auctioneer looked at Daniel with something like pity. He asked if the human wished to withdraw from the bidding. There was no shame in it. The clearly had deeper pockets. Daniel thought about his ship. The Quiet Dawn was old and worn, but it was his. He had bought it with 10 years of savings. He had repaired it with his own hands. It was his home in a universe that did not have many places for humans like him. He could offer it as collateral. The thought made him feel sick. If he lost the ship, he would have nothing. No way to work, no way to travel, no way to survive. He would be stranded on whatever station he landed on, dependent on the charity of strangers. But if he walked away now, those two little girls would be separated forever. Would go to the mining colonies. She would work until her body gave out. She would die alone in some dark tunnel far from anyone who loved her. Would be sold again, maybe to someone kind, probably not. She was too young to work and too young to defend herself. The universe was not kind to children like her. Daniel thought about again. He thought about holding her hand during thunderstorms. He thought about the promise he made to always protect her. He thought about what she would say if she knew her brother walked away from two frightened children to save his ship. He offered the Quiet Dawn as collateral and raised his bid above. The room went completely silent. Stared at Daniel for a long moment. His 4 eyes blinked one at a time, then all at once. He was calculating, trying to understand this human who was willing to lose everything for strangers. The auctioneer asked if he wished to continue bidding. Looked at and on the platform. Then he looked back at Daniel. He said this was foolish. He said Daniel was destroying himself for nothing. These aliens would not thank him. They would not repay him. They would take whatever he offered and then disappear. Daniel said that was fine. He was not doing this for thanks. His jaw tightened. He could easily outbid Daniel. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was disgust. Maybe he simply did not want to pay so much for what he considered worthless merchandise. He stepped back and waved his hand dismissively. He told the auctioneer he was withdrawing from the bidding. He said Daniel could have his little charity project. He said the human would regret this decision soon enough. But he also said something else. He leaned close to Daniel and spoke quietly so only he could hear. He said Daniel had made an enemy today. He said the universe was smaller than humans thought. He said they would meet again. Then he walked out of the auction room without looking back. The auctioneer cleared his throat and announced that Daniel had won the contract for both sisters. The crowd began to disperse. The excitement was over. People had other business to attend to. Daniel walked toward the platform on legs that felt like water. He had won. He had actually won. But he had also lost everything. His ship was under lien until he could pay off the debt. His account was empty. His future was uncertain. Watched him approach. Her arms were still wrapped tight around. Her expression mixed fear and hope and confusion. Daniel stopped in front of them. He did not know what to say. He had not planned any of this. He had walked into this room looking for ship parts, and now he was responsible for two alien children. Peeked out from behind her sister. Her large dark eyes studied Daniel's face. Then slowly she reached out one small blue hand toward him. Daniel took it gently. It was the beginning of something he did not understand yet, something that would change everything, something that would cost him more than he could imagine. But standing there holding that small hand, he knew one thing for certain. He had made the right choice. The quiet dawn was not much to look at. It was an old cargo hauler with rust on the hull and patches where repairs had been made over the years. The paint was faded, and the interior smelled like engine grease and recycled air. But it was home to Daniel, and now it would have to be home to two small sisters as well. Daniel led and through the narrow corridors of the ship, walked close behind him with her hand gripping her sister's arm. Her eyes scanned every corner and shadow. She was looking for danger. She had learned to always look for danger. Stayed quiet and held on to her sister like she might disappear at any moment. Daniel showed them the small cabin where he slept. It had a single bunk attached to the wall and a storage compartment underneath. The sheets were clean but worn. A small window showed the stars outside. He told them they could sleep here. He would take the pilot's seat in the cockpit. It was not comfortable, but he had slept in worse places. Looked at the bunk and then at Daniel. Her antennae twitched with suspicion. She asked why he was doing this. Nobody gave things away without wanting something in return. What did he want from them? Daniel sat down on a crate near the door. He looked tired, more tired than he had felt in years. He said he did not want anything. He said he just could not watch them be separated. Did not believe him. Her eyes stayed hard and wary. She said people always wanted something. The refugee camp wanted their work. The auctioneer wanted his commission. The wanted cheap labor. Everyone wanted something. Daniel nodded slowly. He understood why she felt that way. The universe had not been kind to her. It had taken her parents and her home and her safety. It had tried to take her sister too. He told her about. He said he had a younger sister back on Earth. She was grown now with a family of her own. But when they were children, he had promised to always protect her. He said watching Hold on that platform reminded him of Holding's hand during hard times. He said he could not walk away from that. Listened without expression. Then slowly something in her face softened. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of something that could become trust someday. Tugged on her sister's arm and whispered something in their own language. Nodded and looked at Daniel. She said was hungry. Daniel went to the small kitchen area and found what food he had left. It was not much. Some protein bars and dried fruit and a container of grain meal. He did not know what ate, but he hoped this would work. Ate like she had not seen food in days. Maybe she had not. Refugee camps were not known for generous meals. Ate more slowly, watching Daniel the whole time. After the meal, Daniel checked his communication device. He needed to find help. He could not take care of two children on his own. He did not know anything about. He did not know what they needed or how to raise them or where they could find a real home. He thought about Carol. She was an old friend from his early hauling days. She worked at a refugee assistance station 3 systems away. If anyone could help find a proper home for these girls, it was Carol. He sent her a message explaining what had happened. He asked if she knew any families who might be willing to take 2 orphaned sisters. He asked if she could help. Then he started the ship's engines. The quiet dawn groaned and shuddered as it powered up. Warning lights flickered on the console. The fuel injectors he had come to buy were still broken. The engine was running on borrowed time. But he had no choice. He needed to get away from 7 before changed his mind. They lifted off from the station and headed toward open space. Daniel set a course for the jump point that would take them toward Carol's station. It was 3 days of travel under normal conditions, maybe 4 with the engine problems. He hoped they would make it. came into the cockpit after putting to sleep in the cabin. She stood in the doorway watching Daniel work the controls. Her antennae moved slightly as she studied all the buttons and screens. She asked if she could stay here for a while. She said she did not want to sleep yet. Daniel nodded and gestured to the co-pilot seat, climbed into it and pulled her knees up to her chest. She looked small in the oversized seat, fragile and young and carrying more weight than any child should carry. They sat in silence for a long time. The stars moved slowly past the windows. The engine hummed with an unhealthy sound that worried Daniel. Finally spoke. She asked about Earth. She had heard stories about the human but never met a human before today. She asked what it was like. Daniel thought about home. He had not been back in almost 8 years. His work kept him in the outer systems where cargo haulers were needed, but he still remembered. He told her about oceans. He said Earth had more water than land, great blue oceans that stretched to the horizon and beyond. He told her about forests where trees grew so tall you could not see the top. He told her about mountains covered in white snow and deserts made of golden sand. He told her about fishing with when they were young. They would go to a lake near their home and sit on the shore all day. They rarely caught anything, but that was not the point. The point was being together. Listened with her dark eyes growing wider. Her had been destroyed before she was born. She had lived her whole life on ships and stations. She had never seen an ocean or a forest or a mountain. She said it sounded beautiful. Daniel said it was. He said maybe someday she could see it. Earth welcomed refugees from all species. It was not perfect, but it was safe. Was quiet for a moment. Then she said thank you. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said nobody had ever told her stories before. Her parents died when she was young, and the refugee camps did not have time for stories. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He said she was welcome. He said he would tell her more stories tomorrow if she wanted. She nodded and closed her eyes. Within minutes she was asleep in the co-pilot seat. Daniel watched her for a moment. Then he turned back to the controls. The warning lights were blinking faster now. The engine temperature was rising. Something was very wrong. He checked the systems and felt his stomach drop. The fuel injectors had failed completely. They were losing power. They were still 2 days from the jump point and the engine was dying. Daniel stared at the console and tried to think of a solution. There had to be something he could do, some way to fix this, some way to save them. But deep down he knew the truth. They were in serious trouble. The quiet dawn drifted in empty space between stars. The engine had stopped completely 6 hours ago. Emergency power kept the lights on and the air recycling, but nothing else worked. They were stranded. Daniel had spent those 6 hours trying to fix the fuel injectors. He had taken them apart and put them back together 3 times. He had rerouted power from non-essential systems. He had tried everything he knew from years of keeping this old ship running. Nothing worked. Now he sat in the pilot's seat staring at the dark console. The ship was cold because heating required power they did not have. The air was getting thin because the recyclers were working at minimum capacity. Sat in the co-pilot seat within her lap. The younger sister had been crying earlier, but now she was just quiet. That worried Daniel more than the crying. Children should not be that quiet. Asked how long they had. Daniel thought about lying. He thought about telling her everything would be fine, but she deserved the truth. She was young, but she was not stupid. She knew they were in trouble. He said maybe 2 days. The air would run out first. Then the cold would finish what the air started, unless someone found them before that. Nodded slowly. Her face was calm, but her antennae trembled with fear she was trying to hide. She asked if anyone was coming. Daniel had sent a distress signal hours ago. It was broadcasting on all frequencies, but they were in dead space far from the main travel routes. Ships rarely came through here. The chances of someone hearing the signal were small. He said he hoped so. He said he was sorry. He said this was his fault. If he had not bought them at the auction, they would still be on 7. They would be in danger, but they would be alive. Shook her head. She said no. She said if he had not bought them, would have taken her to the mines and would have been sold to someone else. They would have been separated forever. At least here they were together. She reached out and took Daniel's hand. Her blue fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. She said thank you for keeping them together, no matter what happened next. Daniel squeezed her hand gently and tried to smile. He did not feel like smiling, but he wanted to give her something to hold on to. He started telling them stories again. He told them about the time convinced him to climb a tree, and he got stuck at the top for 3 hours. He told them about his first day as a cargo hauler when he accidentally jettisoned half his shipment into space. He told them about a merchant who taught him to play a card game and then cheated him out of a week's pay. Laughed at some of the stories. It was a small sound, but it was beautiful. Daniel kept talking just to hear that laugh again. Hours passed. The air grew thinner. The cold grew deeper. Daniel gave his jacket to the sisters and pretended he was not shivering. Then the sensor panel beeped. Daniel jumped from his seat and checked the display. A ship was approaching. It was large and moving fast. For one moment he felt hope surge through his chest. Then he saw the identification signal. It was a ship. This voice came through the communication system. He sounded pleased with himself. He said he had tracked Daniel's jump trajectory from 7. He said he knew this old hauler would not make it far. He said he had been waiting for this. Daniel asked what he wanted. Said he wanted to make a deal. He would give Daniel enough fuel and parts to survive if Daniel surrendered the sisters. Simple trade. Their lives for his. His hand tightened on Daniel's arm, whimpered and pressed closer to her sister. Daniel looked at them. Then he looked at the communication panel. He could accept the deal. He could save himself. He could fly away and pretend this never happened. Would take the sisters and Daniel would have another chance at life. His hand moved toward the panel. Then he stopped. He thought about the moment in the auction house when looked at him. He thought about the promise he made to himself when he raised his hand. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. He told no. Laughed. He asked if Daniel understood the situation. He asked if Daniel realized he was going to die out here in the cold and the dark. He asked if these worthless aliens were really worth dying for. Daniel said they were worth everything. Went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, harder. He said Daniel was a fool. He said he would wait. The quiet dawn had maybe a day of air left. When they were all unconscious from lack of oxygen, he would board the ship and take the sisters anyway. He said Daniel could spend his final hours knowing he had failed. The communication went dead. Looked at Daniel with wide eyes. She asked why he had refused. She said he could have lived. She said they were not worth his life. Daniel knelt down in front of her so they were at eye level. He told her that some things mattered more than living. He told her that keeping a promise mattered. Protecting someone weaker mattered. Being the kind of person you could respect in the morning mattered. He said he would rather die as someone would be proud of than live as someone she would be ashamed of. Started crying. Started crying too, though she did not fully understand why. Daniel held them both and tried to keep his own tears inside. The hours crawled by. The air grew thinner. Daniel's head started to ache from lack of oxygen. His vision blurred at the edges. His thoughts moved slower. Stopped breathing normally. Her small body struggled to pull in the thin air. Her blue skin turned pale and her antennae drooped. Daniel took off his emergency oxygen mask. Every ship had one for the pilot in case of hull breach. It was meant for him. It was supposed to keep him alive long enough to fix problems. He put it over his face instead. Tried to protest, but Daniel shook his head. He told her to take care of her sister. He told her to be strong. He told her someone would come. Then everything started going dark. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a light outside the window, a new ship coming fast. He did not know if it was rescue or if he was dreaming. Then there was nothing. Daniel woke up in a medical bay he did not recognize. The ceiling was white and clean. The air was warm and rich with oxygen. A soft beeping sound came from somewhere nearby. He tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. Every muscle ached. His head felt like someone had filled it with sand. His throat was dry and raw. A woman appeared beside his bed. She had short gray hair and a weathered face with kind eyes. She told him to take it easy. She said he had almost died out there. Another hour and his brain would have shut down from oxygen deprivation. Daniel asked about the sisters. The woman smiled. She said they were fine. They were sleeping in the next room. The little one had recovered quickly once she got proper air. The older one had refused to leave Daniel's side until she passed out from exhaustion. Daniel felt relief wash through him like warm water. They were alive. All three of them were alive. The woman introduced herself as. She was the captain of a human merchant vessel that had been passing through the sector when they caught Daniel's distress signal. She had arrived just in time to see ship hovering near the quiet dawn like a vulture waiting for its meal. Daniel asked what happened too. Smile turned sharp. She said she had informed that Daniel was a human citizen under her protection. She had also mentioned that her ship had already contacted the local patrol and they were on their way. Apparently decided that 2 refugee children were not worth legal complications and jumped out of the system. But warned Daniel that did not seem like the type to forget. He would probably hold this grudge for a long time. Daniel nodded. He would worry about that later. Right now he was just grateful to be breathing. Pulled up a chair and sat down beside his bed. She asked him to explain what happened. She wanted to know why a human cargo hauler was drifting in dead space with 2 children and a merchant trying to claim them. Daniel told her everything: the auction, the bidding war, the decision to give up his ship as collateral, the engine failure's offer and Daniel's refusal. Listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head and called him an idiot. Daniel could not argue with that, but also said she would have done the same thing. She said there were moments when being smart meant being someone you did not want to be. Sometimes stupid was the only honorable choice. She offered to transport Daniel and the sisters wherever they needed to go. They was heading toward the central systems anyway. It would not be far out of their way. Daniel asked if she could take them to the refugee assistance station where Carol worked. Carol had responded to his message while he was unconscious. She said she had found a family who might be willing to foster both sisters together. They were refugees themselves who had settled on a colony world. They had lost children of their own and wanted to help others. Said she could do that. The journey took 4 days. Daniel spent most of it recovering in the medical bay, but every day and came to visit him, would climb onto his bed and show him drawings she had made with supplies from this recreation room, would sit in the chair and ask questions about Earth and humans and everything she could think of. Daniel told them more stories. He told them about oceans and mountains and forests. He told them about and their parents and the small house where they grew up. He told them about his dreams of seeing the galaxy when he was young and how those dreams had led him to become a cargo hauler. Drew a picture for him. It showed 3 figures holding hands under a yellow star. One was tall and one was medium and one was small. They were smiling. Daniel kept the picture. They arrived at the station on the 5th day. Carol met them at the docking port. She was a tall woman with brown skin and silver streaks in her black hair. She hugged Daniel like they had not seen each other in years, because they had not. She had arranged everything. The family was already at the station waiting to meet, and their names were Myra and they had traveled 2 days to be here. Daniel walked with the sisters to the meeting room. His legs were still weak, but he refused to let that stop him. He needed to see this through. And Myra were older with gentle faces and sad eyes that lit up when they saw the sisters. Myra knelt down and spoke to in their native language, responded shyly at first, but then smiled when Myra said something that made her laugh. Spoke to with serious respect. He did not treat her like a child. He treated her like someone who had carried heavy responsibilities and deserved acknowledgement for that. Suspicious walls began to crumble. Carol explained the arrangement. It was not adoption because that required more legal work, but it was foster care with the intention of becoming permanent, and would live with and Myra on their colony world. They would have a home and a family and a chance at a real life. They would stay together. Hugged Daniel before she left. She held on tight and did not let go for a long time. When she finally pulled back, there were tears on her blue cheeks. She said she was wrong about humans. She said she thought everyone wanted something, but Daniel had wanted nothing except to help them. Daniel told her she was right to be careful. The universe had plenty of people who wanted to use others, but some people were just trying to do the right thing. He told her to stay careful but also stay open. Not everyone was. Hugged him too. She pressed the drawing into his hands and told him not to forget them. Daniel promised he would not. Then they were gone, walking away with and Myra toward a shuttle that would take them to their new home, looked back once and waved. Daniel waved back. Carol stood beside him as they watched the shuttle depart. She asked him what he was going to do now. His ship was under lien. His account was empty. He had nothing. Daniel had been thinking about that. He had no good answers. Appeared behind them. She said she had been thinking too. She said they needed a new pilot. Their old one had retired last month and they had been flying short-handed since then. The pay was decent. The work was steady. And Daniel would have a place to sleep that was not a broken-down cargo hauler. Daniel looked at her. He asked why she was offering this. She barely knew him. Shrugged, she said she liked people who did stupid things for the right reasons. She said the universe needed more of that. Daniel thought about his ship. The Quiet Dawn was probably being claimed by creditors right now. Everything he owned was gone. His savings, his home, his independence. But and were together, they were safe, they had a future. He accepted his offer. They walked back to the together. Daniel's legs were steadier now. His head was clearer. The weight on his shoulders felt different than before, lighter somehow. He climbed into the co-pilot seat and looked at the console. His drawing was in his hand. He found some tape and stuck it to the panel where he could see it every day. 3 figures holding hands under a star. Fired up the engines and they lifted off from the station. The stars spread out before them like scattered diamonds, somewhere out there, and were starting a new life. Daniel smiled. He had lost everything, his ship, his money, his plans. And somehow it felt like enough.